The envelope trembled between Margaret Sullivan's fingers, not from her hands shaking, though at 65 that happened more than she'd like to admit. The tremor came from something deeper, a seismic shift in the bedrock of a life she'd carefully rebuilt over 28 years. Cream-colored linen paper, elegant calligraphy. The return address embossed in subtle gold foil. Jessica Sullivan Pierce, 847 Maple Grove Lane. Maggie set it on the glass table in her lawyer's office, as if distance might neutralize its power. "When did it arrive?" Rachel Foster asked, removing her tortoiseshell glasses to study Maggie's face rather than the invitation. 3 days ago. Maggie's voice came out steadier than expected. 3 days after Forbes published the acquisition announcement. Rachel didn't need clarification. The article had appeared on October 15th. From yoga instructor to millionaire, how Margaret Sullivan built a wellness empire for women starting over. The piece had included her net worth, $52 million after taxes, and a photo of her at WellnessWise headquarters, silver hair worn natural, laugh lines visible, no apologies. "Some coincidences," Maggie continued, "are too perfect to be coincidences at all." Rachel picked up the invitation, scanning it with a lawyer's practiced eye. "Thanksgiving dinner? How traditional." Her tone suggested she found it anything but. "What do you want to do?" What do I want? The question lodged in Maggie's chest like a stone. 28 years ago, her daughter Jessica had asked her to leave an engagement party and never come back. 28 years of returned birthday cards, ignored letters, photographs taken from across the street because she wasn't permitted any closer. 28 years of rebuilding a life from scraps while watching her grandchildren grow up through stolen glimpses and progress reports from her son Tom, who'd maintained secret contact at great personal cost. And now this. An invitation on expensive stationery, arriving precisely when the world knew Maggie had become the kind of wealthy she'd once only dreamed of being. "I want to know why," Maggie said finally, "but I'm terrified of the answer." Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Rachel's downtown office, the October afternoon painted the city in amber light. Maggie's own loft was visible a few blocks south, the converted warehouse space she'd bought 10 years ago when WellnessWise started turning real profit. She'd furnished it simply. Wide plank floors, vintage Persian rugs, plants that actually thrived under her care. No family photos on the walls. Those wounds were too fresh, even after nearly 3 decades. "Do you want me to dig?" Rachel asked. "Find out what's really happening with the Pierce family?" Maggie studied her lawyer's face. Rachel was 52, brilliant, and one of the few people who knew the whole story. She'd handled the acquisition, yes, but before that, she'd helped Maggie file the restraining order when Brandon Pierce's security guard had physically removed her from the property after she'd been spotted watching her grandson's 6th birthday party from across the street. "You already did," Maggie said. It wasn't a question. Rachel's smile was thin. "Brandon Pierce is under FBI investigation for real estate fraud and money laundering. The Pierce family office is facing multiple civil suits, assets frozen. The mansion in Westbrook? Foreclosed last month. They're living in a rental in Maplewood now." The information settled over Maggie like ash. Part of her, the wounded part that still bled when she saw mothers and daughters shopping together, laughing over coffee, sharing the easy intimacy she'd been denied, felt a savage satisfaction. So the perfect life Jessica chose over me wasn't so perfect after all. But another part, the part she'd cultivated through thousands of hours of yoga practice and therapy and building a company dedicated to helping women heal, felt only sadness. "Jessica lost her CMO position when Brandon's company dissolved," Rachel continued. "Legal fees are hemorrhaging their remaining accessible funds. Tom mentioned she's been struggling." "Tom told you this?" "Tom's wife called me. She thought you should know before you decided whether to respond." Maggie stood, moving to the window. Below, the city pulsed with evening traffic. People heading home to families, to dinner tables where everyone was welcome, where love wasn't contingent on net worth or social status. "What do I owe her, Rachel?" The question came out raw. "What does a mother owe a daughter who erased her?" "Legally? Nothing. Morally? Rachel joined her at the window. That's above my pay grade, but I'll tell you what you don't owe her. The pretense that those 28 years didn't happen. Maggie's phone buzzed. A text from Rosa Martinez, her best friend and WellnessWise's COO. Coffee tomorrow? Need to talk about the Jessica situation. Tom called me, too. Whole family's in crisis mode. Of course they are, Maggie thought. Because I have money now, and money makes me relevant again. She picked up the invitation, reading it properly for the first time. You are cordially invited to join us for Thanksgiving dinner at 3 p.m. We would be honored by your presence. It's been too long. Jessica, it's been too long. 4 words attempting to bridge a chasm 28 years wide. I need to think, Maggie said, tucking the invitation into her bag. A canvas tote from the farmer's market, not designer leather. Some habits from her years of poverty had remained intentional choices. Think fast, Rachel advised. Thanksgiving is 5 weeks away. And Maggie, whatever you decide, I've got your back. As Maggie left the office building, the cooling October air carried the scent of roasting coffee and car exhaust. She walked the 6 blocks to her loft rather than calling a car, needing movement to process the weight of the invitation burning a hole in her bag. 28 years. The number had been her constant companion, marking time like a prisoner counting days. 28 years since that December evening when her daughter's words had severed their relationship with surgical precision. 28 years of wondering if she'd been a terrible mother, if she'd somehow deserved abandonment. 28 years of building a life anyway, because survival was the only alternative to surrender. At home, Maggie changed into comfortable clothes, leggings and an oversized sweater, and unrolled her yoga mat in the space by the windows where evening light pooled golden and forgiving. She moved through sun salutations slowly, breathing into each pose, trying to find the clarity that usually came with practice. But tonight, her mind wouldn't quiet. It spiraled back to that engagement party, to her daughter's face twisted with embarrassment and rage, to the words that still echoed across decades. You're embarrassing, Mom. Brandon's family asked if you were the caterer tonight. And honestly, you look the part. Maggie collapsed out of downward dog and sat on her mat, knees pulled to chest, letting the tears come. She'd learned in therapy that crying wasn't weakness. It was the body processing what the mind couldn't hold. Her phone buzzed again. This time, Emma, Jessica's daughter, Maggie's granddaughter, though they'd never officially met. The 28-year-old had found Maggie on social media 6 months ago and started watching her WellnessWise videos. 3 months ago, she'd sent a direct message. I think you're my grandmother. I'd like to talk. Their secret coffee dates had been revelatory. Emma was a social worker with her mother's sharp cheekbones and Maggie's stubborn chin. She was also the first person in Jessica's family to reach out, not because she needed something, but because she wanted to know the truth. The text read, Did you get the invitation? Mom's freaking out that you haven't responded. I told her that's what happens when you ghost someone for 3 decades. Despite everything, Maggie smiled. Emma had inherited her directness along with her chin. She typed back, Got it. Still deciding. Emma's response came immediately. Whatever you decide, I still want our coffee dates. Your call, Grandma. Grandma. The word wrapped around Maggie's heart like a gentle hand. She'd waited 28 years to be called that by someone who meant it. She put the phone down and returned to her mat, settling into child's pose. In the darkness behind her closed eyelids, she asked herself the question that mattered. What does Margaret Sullivan want? Not revenge, though God knew she'd fantasized about it in the early years. Not reconciliation. That word implied fixing something that might be too shattered to repair. Not even understanding, because she'd made peace with never knowing why Jessica had chosen Brandon Pierce's approval over her mother's love. What she wanted, she realized, was choice. The same choice she'd finally given herself at 53, after the heart attack that had nearly killed her. The choice to stop waiting for permission to live fully. Jessica's invitation was another threshold. Maggie could decline and maintain the hard-won peace of her current life. Or she could walk back into the fire and risk everything she'd built, including her carefully guarded heart. The decision, for once, was entirely hers. And that, Maggie thought as she rose from her mat and moved to her kitchen to prepare tea, was its own kind of power. 28 years earlier, December 1996. The Pierce estate glittered like something from a magazine spread, all white lights and elegant wreaths, and a tree in the foyer that had to be 16 feet tall. Maggie stood just inside the entrance, clutching a gift bag containing the only present she could afford, a hand-thrown pottery vase from a student in her yoga class who worked as a ceramicist. "Mom!" Jessica appeared in a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than Maggie's monthly rent. At 27, her daughter had grown into a polished version of herself, hair professionally straightened, makeup flawless, body whittled thin by what Maggie suspected was more than just healthy eating. "You made it." Jessica's hug was brief, performative. Over her shoulder, Maggie saw Brandon Pierce watching them, his expression unreadable. "Wouldn't miss it, honey." Maggie tried to ignore how her consignment store dress suddenly felt shabby, how her sensible pumps looked clunky next to the designer heels clicking across marble floors. The party was already in full swing. Women in diamonds, men in tailored suits, servers circulating with champagne and canapes. Maggie recognized no one. Jessica had been dating Brandon for 2 years, and Maggie had met him exactly 3 times, each visit shorter than the last, each one making her daughter more of a stranger. "Margaret!" Lillian Pierce descended like a queen granting audience. Brandon's mother was 60, immaculately preserved, wearing what Maggie guessed was a Chanel suit. "How lovely you could join us. Jessica mentioned you're a yoga instructor?" The pause before yoga instructor contained volumes. "Yes," Maggie said, keeping her voice steady. "I teach at the community center and a few private studios." "How quaint." Lillian's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Do you teach at a real studio or just, church basements and such?" Heat crawled up Maggie's neck. "I teach wherever people want to learn." "Of course." Lillian turned to Jessica. "Darling, I need to introduce you to the Hendersons. They're interested in your marketing expertise." And just like that, Maggie was dismissed. She watched her daughter disappear into the crowd, Brandon's hand proprietarily on the small of Jessica's back, guiding her like she couldn't walk on her own. The evening dragged. Maggie nursed a single glass of wine, more than she usually drank, but she needed something to do with her hands. She made small talk with other guests who clearly couldn't place her in the Pierce family hierarchy. The coat check girl thought she was a caterer. The valet asked if she needed help finding the service entrance. By 9 p.m., Maggie was ready to leave. She found Jessica in the kitchen, alone, mascara smudged, gripping the edge of the marble counter so hard her knuckles had gone white. "Sweetheart?" Maggie touched her daughter's shoulder gently. Jessica flinched. "I'm fine, Mom." "You don't look fine. You've lost weight. And—" Maggie noticed the faint bruise on Jessica's wrist, quickly covered when her daughter tugged down her sleeve. "Honey, are you okay? With Brandon?" "Don't." Jessica's voice was sharp. "Don't start." "Start what? Being concerned about my daughter?" "Being judgmental." Jessica poured herself more wine with shaking hands. "You don't understand what this is like, the pressure. Brandon's mother. What about what you want, Jessica?" Maggie heard her voice rising but couldn't stop it. "When's the last time I heard you say I want instead of Brandon thinks or Lillian expects?" "You don't get it." Jessica whirled to face her. "This is my chance, Mom, to have something better than—" She stopped, but the end of that sentence hung between them like smoke. "Better than what? Than me?" Maggie's heart was hammering. "Than the life we had? We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in the bad part of town." Jessica's voice cracked. "You worked 3 jobs and were never home. Do you know what it was like being the kid whose mom cleaned hotel rooms? Whose school clothes came from Goodwill?" The words hit like physical blows. "I did the best I could," Maggie whispered. "After your father died—" "You were never there!" Jessica was crying now, mascara running. "You missed my school plays. You forgot my birthday once because you were too exhausted to remember. And now you stand here in your discount dress, judging my choices." I'm not judging you. I'm worried about you. That bruise, there's no bruise. Jessica pulled her sleeve down farther. You're seeing things because you want to see problems. You can't stand that I'm building something you never could. Lillian Pierce appeared in the doorway. Not suddenly. She'd been listening. Her smile was cold triumph. Is everything all right? Lillian asked, though her tone made clear she knew it wasn't. It's fine, Jessica said quickly. Too quickly. Margaret, perhaps you'd be more comfortable. Mom needs to leave, Jessica interrupted. Her eyes, meeting Maggie's, were hard, unfamiliar. Actually, I need to tell you something. The kitchen suddenly felt airless. I don't want you at the wedding, Jessica said, each word carefully enunciated as if she'd practiced. You won't fit. With Brandon's family. With the life we're building. The floor tilted. Jessica, Brandon's right. You're toxic. Jessica's voice grew stronger, fed by something. Rage? Fear? Lillian's satisfied presence? Always making me feel guilty for wanting more than scraping by. For wanting better than what you had. I wanted better for you, too, Maggie said. Her voice sounded strange in her own ears. That's why I work those jobs. That's why you have nothing, Mom. No husband, no career, no real future. And I won't let you drag me down with you. The kitchen door swung open. Brandon stepped in, his expression suggesting he'd been waiting for his cue. Everything okay, babe? He put his arm around Jessica, and Maggie saw her daughter lean into him like he was the only solid thing in the room. My mother was just leaving, Jessica said. Jessica, please. Maggie reached for her. Don't. Jessica stepped back. Don't call. Don't write. Don't show up at the wedding. I mean it, Mom. You're embarrassing. Brandon's family asked if you were the caterer tonight. And honestly, you look the part. The cruelty of it stole Maggie's breath. Is that really what you want? She managed. Jessica lifted her chin, my chin, Maggie thought wildly, and said, yes. Maggie left through the service entrance, walking past surprised catering staff to her 14-year-old Toyota in the back lot. Rain had started falling, cold December rain that soaked through her discount dress before she could get the car door open. She sat in the driver's seat, shaking too hard to put the key in the ignition, and waited for the sob to come. It didn't. She was too shocked for tears. You're toxic, you're embarrassing, you look the part. She'd sacrificed everything, meals, dentist appointments, new clothes, her own education, to give Jessica opportunities. And her daughter had just returned those sacrifices like they were defective merchandise. Maggie drove home to her apartment, the one Jessica had called the bad part of town. She let herself in, stood in the small living room surrounded by secondhand furniture and photos of a daughter who no longer wanted her. And finally, the sob came. It didn't stop. She cried through the night, through the dawn, through the moment when she should have been getting ready for her shift at the hotel. She called in sick, the first time in 12 years, and lay on the bathroom floor, the tile cool against her burning face. By the second day, she'd convinced herself Jessica would call to apologize. The third day, she was sure of it. By the end of the first week, hope had curdled into something harder. Jessica's wedding announcement arrived in the mail 6 months later. A formal card, no personal note. The ceremony had already happened at the Pierce estate. Maggie learned from her son Tom, poor Tom, caught between loyalty to his mother and maintaining his relationship with his sister, that it had been beautiful. 200 guests, no expense spared. Maggie hadn't been worth mentioning in the ceremony program, Tom reported reluctantly, as if she'd never existed. She sent a gift anyway, the hand-stitched quilt she'd been making for Jessica since her daughter was born, adding squares for every major milestone. The package came back unopened, returned to sender, written in Jessica's handwriting. That was when Maggie finally understood. This wasn't a fight that would blow over. This wasn't a temporary estrangement. Her daughter had amputated her. And somehow, impossibly, Maggie was going to have to figure out how to live with a phantom limb for the rest of her life. 1997 to 2024. The first year after Jessica's wedding, Maggie kept a calendar where she marked each day she didn't hear from her daughter. Red X's marching across months like wounds. She stopped after day 365. The visual representation of absence had become more painful than the absence itself. Tom brought her the first photograph when his niece Emma was 6 months old. He showed up at Maggie's apartment unannounced, looking guilty and determined in equal measure. "Jess would kill me if she knew," he said, handing over a photo of a chubby baby with dark hair. "But you're my mom, too. You deserve to know your grandchild exists." Maggie had held that photo like it might disintegrate, memorizing every detail of the granddaughter she'd never meet. "What's she like?" "Beautiful, stubborn. She has your chin." Tom smiled sadly. "Jess won't talk about you. Brandon's forbidden your name in the house. Lillian Pierce acts like you never existed." "Maybe I don't," Maggie whispered. "Not to them." But Tom kept coming. Every few months he'd sneak over with new photos, stories, proof that Maggie's bloodline continued even if she wasn't permitted to witness it. When Lucas was born 2 years later, Tom brought his first hospital photo still warm from the printer. "You can't tell Jess," Tom said each time. "Promise me." And Maggie promised, hating herself for the secrecy, grateful for the scraps. The second year, Maggie's grief transformed into depression so profound she could barely get out of bed. She lost her job at the hotel. Too many sick days. The yoga studio cut her classes in half. She was drowning, and there was no one to save her because she was too ashamed to admit how thoroughly her daughter's rejection had broken her. On the worst night, she stood in her bathroom with a bottle of sleeping pills, thinking how much easier it would be to stop existing rather than continue living as a ghost. The phone rang. Tom, checking in. She didn't answer, but his voicemail saved her. "Ma, I know you're struggling. Please don't do anything stupid. I love you. Emma asks about the grandma in the photos. Someday, I swear, I'll make this right. Someday." The word became her lifeline. She flushed the pills. She called the sliding scale therapy clinic she'd been too proud to contact. She showed up to the first appointment 45 minutes late because she'd sat in her car crying, but she showed up. The therapist, Dr. Nina Okafor, was a black woman in her 60s with kind eyes and no patience for self-pity. "Your daughter rejected you," Dr. Okafor said in their third session, after Maggie had spent 2 hours explaining the backstory. "That's a fact. Now what are you going to do about it?" "What can I do?" "Live anyway." Dr. Okafor leaned forward. "Ms. Sullivan, you can spend the next 30 years waiting for your daughter to choose you, or you can choose yourself. Those are your options." The concept felt revolutionary and impossible in equal measure. "I don't know how to do that," Maggie admitted. "Then we'll figure it out together." It took 4 years of weekly therapy, medication for depression, and more false starts than Maggie could count. But slowly, molecule by molecule, she began rebuilding. At 44, she enrolled in night classes at community college. Psychology first. She wanted to understand what had happened, why Jessica had been able to sever their bond so completely. Then counseling certification, thinking vaguely that maybe she could help others navigate what she'd survived. That's where she met Rosa Martinez. Rosa was 42, recently divorced, raising 2 teenage daughters alone while working full-time as a nurse. She sat next to Maggie in their developmental psychology class and immediately started a conversation as if they'd been friends for years. "You look like you haven't slept in a month," Rosa observed during their first break. "Kids or existential crisis?" "Both," Maggie offered weakly. "Girl, same." Rosa handed her half a sandwich without asking. "I'm Rosa. Fair warning. I'm nosy. I give unsolicited advice, and I'm probably going to adopt you as a friend whether you like it or not." It was the first time Maggie had laughed in months. Their friendship became one of the load-bearing walls of Maggie's reconstruction. Rosa was practical where Maggie spiraled into overthinking. She was loud where Maggie had learned to stay quiet. She insisted on girls' nights, on celebration of small victories, on treating yourself like you matter even when you're not sure you do. "Your daughter's loss," Rosa said bluntly when Maggie finally told her the whole story. "You're fucking amazing. She'll figure it out eventually." And if she doesn't? Then you'll be amazing anyway. That's how this works. Maggie graduated with her associate's degree at 46. She continued teaching yoga. It had become meditation in motion, the one place her racing mind found stillness. She started offering free classes at the women's shelter, teaching breathing exercises to women escaping abuse, showing them how their bodies could be homes rather than prisons. That's where she met David Park. David was 35, a software developer who volunteered at the shelter teaching coding classes. He was Korean American, quiet and thoughtful, with an easy smile and a gift for explaining complex technology in simple terms. "You're good at this," he observed one evening, watching Maggie guide a circle of women through a trauma-informed yoga sequence. "The way you hold space for them, it's special." "I'm just sharing what helped me survive," Maggie said. Exactly. David pulled out his laptop. "Have you ever thought about reaching out to more people, like online?" "I barely know how to use email." "I could teach you." His enthusiasm was infectious. Video content, streaming classes, building community online. The women who can't physically get to shelters or studios, they need this too. It was a seed planted. Maggie wasn't ready to nurture it yet, still too consumed with just surviving each day. But the seed was there. Then came the heart attack. Maggie was 53, teaching an advanced vinyasa flow class at her regular studio, when her left arm went numb. She finished the class. Years of pushing through exhaustion had trained her to ignore her body's warnings, and collapsed in the parking lot. 3 days in cardiac ICU, stents placed, medication prescribed, stern warnings from doctors about stress and lifestyle changes. Her visitors were Rosa and David. Tom came once, sneaking away from a family dinner, bringing photos of 14-year-old Emma and 12-year-old Lucas. He stayed 20 minutes, terrified of being caught. "I'm sorry, Ma," he said, kissing her forehead. "I'm so sorry you're going through this alone." But she wasn't alone. Rosa slept in the chair beside her hospital bed the first night, refusing to leave. David brought his laptop and showed her funny YouTube videos to keep her spirits up. The women from her shelter classes sent a card signed by 20 people, with messages like, "You saved my life, now save yours," and "Come back to us." On the third night, unable to sleep, Maggie had her reckoning. "I almost died, and I've spent the last 16 years waiting for permission to live fully." Jessica wasn't coming. The grand reconciliation Maggie had secretly hoped for, where her daughter would suddenly realize what she'd lost and come back, repentant, wasn't happening. Jessica was busy raising Emma and Lucas, building her career, being Mrs. Brandon Pierce. She'd moved on as if Maggie had never existed. It was time for Maggie to do the same. Not to stop loving Jessica, she couldn't turn that off any more than she could stop her heart from beating, but to stop organizing her entire existence around Jessica's absence. "I'm 53 years old," Maggie thought, watching the IV drip carry medication into her veins. "If I'm lucky, I have 20, maybe 30 more years. Do I want to spend them frozen in grief? Or do I want to build something?" The next morning when David visited, she said, "Tell me more about this online platform idea." His face lit up. "Seriously?" "Seriously. I'm done waiting for my life to start." Building wellness-wise was like learning to walk after years of paralysis. Awkward, painful, requiring muscles Maggie had forgotten she had. David handled the technical side, building a simple website where Maggie could upload yoga and meditation videos. Rosa helped with marketing, leveraging her nursing network to spread word about mental health resources for women. Maggie created content in her living room, using a cheap camera and natural light, talking directly to the screen like she was having coffee with a friend. Her first video was titled "Rebuilding After Loss." She didn't mention Jessica by name, but she talked about estrangement, about grief for someone still living, about the particular violence of being erased by someone you'd given everything to. It got 47 views in the first month. Maggie considered quitting. Then the comments started coming. "This is the first time I've heard someone describe what I'm going through. I'm estranged from my son. I thought I was the only one. Your words gave me permission to start living again." The views climbed. 100, 500. Maggie created more content. Yoga for grief, meditation for anxiety, honest talks about single motherhood and financial struggle, and what it means to start over in middle age. A year after launch, A Letter to the Daughter Who Left went viral, 2 million views in 3 weeks. Maggie woke up to dozens of interview requests, think pieces about parental estrangement, strangers sharing their own stories in the comments. Media outlets wanted her to name Jessica, to make it a revenge story. Maggie refused. "This isn't about her anymore," she told Rosa. "It's about everyone carrying this kind of wound. They need to know they're not alone." By 55, WellnessWise had evolved into a full platform, subscription-based yoga and meditation videos, a forum where women could share their stories, live Q&As with therapists and life coaches. The tagline Rosa came up with became their North Star, for women starting over no matter how many times. Maggie's face became recognizable. Women approached her at grocery stores, at yoga studios, sharing their stories of divorce, loss, abandonment, resurrection. She held space for each one, knowing intimately the courage it took to rebuild from rubble. The business grew. 10,000 subscribers. 50,000. They hired staff. Other women starting over, building careers from their own survival stories. They partnered with therapy platforms, added features for community support, created scholarships for women who couldn't afford subscriptions. By 60, WellnessWise had 500,000 paid subscribers and was generating $8 million in annual revenue. Maggie still lived modestly. The same loft, same Subaru Outback, same preference for farmers market vegetables over fancy restaurants. She gave 40% of her income to women's causes, domestic violence shelters, single-parent scholarships, job training programs. "You could be living like a queen," David observed during one of their Friday afternoon business meetings. "I did that already," Maggie replied. "Being queen of my own life matters more than looking like one." At 64, when the acquisition offer came, a major health corporation wanting to integrate WellnessWise into their platform for $52 million, Maggie's first instinct was to refuse. "Why would I sell?" she asked Rachel, her lawyer. "This is my purpose." "Because legacy isn't about holding on forever," Rachel replied. "It's about ensuring what you built continues after you're gone. And because, frankly, Maggie, you're exhausted. When's the last time you took a vacation?" The negotiations took 6 months. Maggie insisted on terms protecting the company's mission. She'd stay on as wellness advisor. The platform would maintain its commitment to accessibility. Profits would continue supporting women's causes. The deal closed in October 2024. Forbes ran the profile. And 3 days later, the invitation from Jessica arrived. Through it all, Tom continued his secret visits. He brought photos. Emma graduating from college with a social work degree, Lucas heading off to business school. He shared stories Maggie hoarded like treasure. Emma was brilliant and passionate about helping families in crisis. Lucas was quieter, analytical, but with a dry humor that reminded Tom of their father. "Do they know about me?" Maggie asked during one visit. "They know you exist. Jess told them you were unstable and it was healthier for everyone if you stayed away." Tom looked pained. "Emma's been asking questions lately. She's in her 20s now, doing work with estranged families. I think she's starting to see through the story." "Don't push it," Maggie said quickly. "I won't be the reason you lose your relationship with your sister." But Tom pushed anyway. And 6 months before the Thanksgiving invitation, Emma sent Maggie a direct message on Instagram. "I think you're my grandmother. I'd like to talk." Their first coffee was awkward. 28 years of absence made introductions strange. But Emma had her questions prepared, and she asked them with the directness of someone who'd spent her career cutting through family mythology to find truth. "Why did you and my mom stop talking?" Maggie took a breath. "I told her I was worried about her relationship with your father. She told me to leave and never come back. I respected her wishes." "For 28 years?" "I tried to come back, many times. Every attempt was refused." Emma processed this. "She told us you abandoned us, that you chose your own life over being a grandmother. The lie shouldn't have hurt any more. It did. I sent birthday presents every year until you were 10, Maggie said quietly. Your mother returned them all. I have the receipts. Emma's face shifted through several emotions. I want to see them. So Maggie showed her the albums of returned gifts, the cards marked return to sender, the photos Tom had sneaked over the years, evidence of a grandmother who'd been present all along, just invisible. Why are you telling me this now? Emma asked, tears streaming down her face. Because you asked, and because you deserve the truth. Maggie reached across the table, took Emma's hand. But I don't want to be another wedge between you and your mother. If knowing this damages your relationship with her, my relationship with her is already damaged. Emma squeezed Maggie's hand. Because it's built on lies. I just didn't know it until now. They met monthly after that. Coffee, lunch, walks through the city. Maggie learned about Emma's work with the Department of Child and Family Services, her frustration with systemic problems, her passion for keeping families together when possible and protecting children when not. You would have been good at this work, Emma said during one of their walks. The way you hold space for people's pain without trying to fix it immediately. I learned from my own, Maggie replied. And now, holding Jessica's Thanksgiving invitation in her hands, Maggie understood. Emma had told her mother about their meetings, and Jessica, facing financial crisis, social disgrace, the collapse of the perfect life she'd chosen, had decided it was time to bring her mother back. Not out of love, out of need. The question was, what was Maggie going to do about it? Maggie arrived at 847 Maple Grove Lane in her Subaru Outback, refusing the hired driver Rosa had suggested. Some entrances required humility, not performance. The house was modest by Pierce family standards, a 1970s split level in need of new siding, with a small yard and a crooked mailbox. This was what downward mobility looked like for people who'd once lived in mansions. She sat in the car for 3 minutes, steadying her breathing. You're not the desperate single mother anymore. You're not the waitress in the discount dress. You're Margaret Sullivan, and you built an empire from heartbreak. Walk in there knowing your worth. The door opened before she could knock. Jessica stood there, 55 years old and painfully thin, wearing expensive casual wear that hung loose on her frame. Botox had frozen her forehead, but couldn't hide the stress lines around her mouth, the exhaustion in her eyes. Mother. The word sounded foreign in Jessica's mouth. It's been too long. 28 years, 4 months, and 16 days, Maggie replied. Not bitterly, just factually. Jessica flinched. Please come in. The interior was trying too hard. Designer furniture crammed into small rooms, fresh flowers and expensive vases, everything arranged to suggest the family was doing fine when the house itself whispered otherwise. Brandon Pierce emerged from the kitchen, 57 and still handsome in the way of men who've never had to build character because charm got them everything. His smile was practiced, his handshake too firm. Maggie, good to finally see you after all these years. Finally. As if the estrangement had been mutual, a simple scheduling conflict. Brandon, Maggie kept her voice neutral. Emma appeared behind her father, and Maggie's breath caught. Her granddaughter had her father's height and her mother's bone structure, but that stubborn chin, that was pure Sullivan. Grandma Maggie. Emma's hug was real, fierce. I'm glad you came. Me too, honey. Lucas followed, 26 and uncomfortable, offering an awkward handshake. It's nice to meet you, ma'am. Call me Maggie. Or Grandma if you want. She smiled at him gently. Ma'am makes me feel ancient. They moved to the dining room where the table was set with china that had probably been rescued from the mansion sale. The food was catered. Jessica had never been much of a cook, another skill Maggie had never had time to teach her. The meal began with strained small talk. Brandon asked about wellness-wise with the fake interest of someone who'd memorized talking points. Jessica kept jumping up to check on dishes that didn't need checking. Lucas stared at his plate. Only Emma seemed willing to engage authentically. So, Grandma, how did you decide to start the company? Emma asked. I had a heart attack, Maggie said simply. Woke up in the hospital and realized I'd spent 16 years waiting for my real life to start. Decided to start it myself instead. Jessica's fork clattered against her plate. That's when I met David Park. He's my co-founder. He suggested putting my yoga teaching online. I thought he was crazy. Maggie smiled at the memory. Turns out he was right. David Park, the tech investor? Lucas looked up, suddenly interested. He's your business partner? He is. Smart as hell, patient as a saint. He taught me everything about technology while I taught him everything about actually listening to women's needs, instead of assuming we want what men think we want. Brandon cleared his throat. That must have been quite a learning curve. Going from teaching yoga at community centers to running a multi-million-dollar corporation. There it was, the first barb, wrapped in false admiration. It was, Maggie agreed calmly. But I'd already learned how to stretch $1 to feed 2 kids on a waitress's income. Scaling a business is just applied problem solving. Same skills, different context. Still, Brandon persisted, you must have had help. Advisors, investors. No one builds something like that alone. No one builds anything worthwhile alone, Maggie said. I had David's technical expertise, Rosa's business sense, and an entire community of women who'd survived what I had. That's the advantage of starting later in life. You're not trying to prove you're the smartest person in the room. You're trying to build something that actually helps people. The doorbell rang, startling everyone. That'll be Tom, Jessica said, standing quickly. I invited him. Hope that's okay? Tom entered like a man walking into an ambush, shoulders tense, eyes darting between his mother and sister. But when he saw Maggie, his face softened. Hey, Ma. His hug was longer than Jessica's, genuine. You look good. You too, honey. Tom's wife, Kelly, followed, then their 2 teenagers. Maggie's other grandchildren, who actually knew her, who called her Nana Maggie, and sent her TikToks she didn't understand but appreciated anyway. The energy shifted with Tom's family present. The teens' chatter filled awkward silences. Kelly asked about Maggie's loft renovation. Tom sat beside his mother like a physical barrier between her and potential harm. It was during dessert that Brandon finally stopped performing. Maggie, I'm glad you're here. We should discuss the situation. His voice had dropped the false friendliness. I'm sure you're aware that you're under FBI investigation for real estate fraud and money laundering, Maggie cut in. Yes, I'm aware. My lawyer did her due diligence before I accepted the invitation. Jessica went pale. Lucas stared at his father with something like disgust. Emma sat back, arms crossed, watching. The accusations are overblown, Brandon started. Dad, stop. Lucas's voice was quiet but firm. Just stop. Brandon turned on his son. Lucas, no. This is exactly what Emma said would happen. We invite Grandma here, pretend it's about family, then hit her up for money to pay your legal fees. Lucas stood. I'm not doing this. I'm going to the kitchen. He left. After a moment, Emma followed. The silence that remained was combustible. Jessica, Maggie said quietly, why did you really invite me here? Her daughter's composure cracked. Tears welled, mascara beginning to run. She'd always been a crier when cornered. Can't a daughter want to see her mother after too long? After 28 years? 3 days after Forbes published my net worth? Maggie kept her voice gentle but unyielding. Let's be honest with each other. We owe each other at least that. Tom put his head in his hands. Kelly quietly collected the teenagers and moved them to the living room. Fine. Jessica's voice hardened, the vulnerability replaced by defensive anger. You want honesty? We're drowning. The legal fees are astronomical. Our assets are frozen. Brandon might go to prison. We've lost everything. The house, our reputation, our future. And I don't know what to do. So you thought of me. You're my mother. Jessica was crying openly now. You're supposed to help. That's what family does. Maggie reached into her bag and pulled out a leather portfolio. She'd known this moment was coming, had prepared for it with Rachel's help. I brought something, she said, opening it to reveal professionally bound documents. 3 irrevocable trusts, established last week. Jessica leaned forward, hope naked on her face. The first is educational. College funds for any future grandchildren from my children or grandchildren. The second supports early career social workers making under $50,000 annually. Emma qualifies if she applies. The third provides housing assistance for women over 50 rebuilding after financial crisis. Maggie looked directly at her daughter. All 3 are irrevocable, Jessica. Professionally managed by independent trustees. They cannot be accessed, borrowed against, redirected, or used to pay legal fees. The money is protected. From everyone, including me. The hope in Jessica's face curdled into shock, then fury. You're refusing to help us? Her voice climbed. After everything? Maggie's calm cracked slightly. Let's talk about everything, Jessica. Every birthday card you returned, every Christmas gift you sent back. 28 years of silence while I worked 3 jobs and put myself through college and built a business and survived a heart attack completely alone. You don't understand what it was like, Jessica shouted. Lillian Pierce made it clear you weren't acceptable. Your discount clothes, your secondhand furniture, your working-class life. My working-class life put you through college, Maggie said quietly. It paid for your apartment your first year out of school. It gave you the freedom to wait for the right job instead of taking anything immediately. And I was supposed to be grateful? Grateful for being the poor kid? Grateful for having a mother who embarrassed me? Jessica was standing now, shaking. You don't know what it's like being ashamed of where you came from. You're right. Maggie stood too, meeting her daughter's eyes. I was never ashamed of where I came from. I was too busy surviving to have time for shame. This is why I cut you out, Jessica hissed. You always made me feel guilty for wanting more than struggle, more than just surviving. I wanted more for you too, Maggie said. That's why I sacrificed everything. But I wanted you to have more while still knowing your worth. Instead, you traded your worth for Brandon's approval and Lillian's acceptance. Brandon stood abruptly. That's enough. You come into our home. Stop. Emma appeared in the doorway, voice sharp as glass. Everyone just stop. She walked to the table, picked up Maggie's portfolio, and looked at her mother. You knew she was sending us things? Emma's voice shook. Birthday presents, Christmas gifts. You sent them back and told us she abandoned us? Jessica's face went white. Emma, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. Emma turned to her grandmother. Show her. Show her what you showed me. Maggie pulled out the second album from her bag, the one she'd never wanted to use but had brought just in case. Page after page of returned envelopes, receipts for gifts, cards marked Return to Sender. Photos Tom had brought, annotated with dates and occasions. 28 years of documentary evidence of a mother who'd never stopped trying. Lucas came back from the kitchen and looked over Emma's shoulder. His face transformed as he turned pages, shock, then hurt, then anger. Mom, he said quietly, you told us she didn't want to know us. I was protecting you, Jessica started. From what? Lucas demanded. From having a grandmother who actually gave a damn? Dad's mother wouldn't give us the time of day unless we performed perfectly. But you kept us from the one who actually loved us? Tom had gone very still, his lawyer's face carefully neutral, but Maggie could see the vindication in his eyes, the relief of secrets finally exposed. I think, Maggie said quietly, putting the album away, I should go. Please don't. Jessica grabbed her arm. Please, I'm sorry. I was young, stupid. You were 35, Maggie corrected gently. Older than I was when your father died and I was left to raise you both alone. You were a grown woman who made a choice, and you reinforced that choice every day for 28 years. She pulled her arm free, not roughly but firmly. I don't hate you, Jessica. I don't even want to punish you. But I won't be used, and I won't pretend those 28 years didn't happen just because your circumstances have changed. Maggie collected her bag and moved toward the door. Emma followed. Grandma, wait, please. Emma's eyes were red-rimmed but clear. Whatever you decide about Mom, can I still see you? I'm not asking because of money or— Yes. Maggie cupped her granddaughter's face. Yes, honey. Monthly coffee stands. That's ours, regardless of what happens with your mother. Thank you. Emma hugged her fiercely. Lucas approached hesitantly. Could I maybe get your number? I'd like to talk sometime. About everything. Maggie smiled through her own tears. I'd like that. She walked to her car, Tom following. Ma, he said as she opened the driver's door. I'm sorry. I thought if she saw you face to face, saw who you'd become. It's okay, honey. Maggie kissed his cheek. You did what you thought was right, but this needs to end differently than you hoped. Some things are too broken to fix. She drove away from 847 Maple Grove Lane as November darkness fell around her. In her rearview mirror, she saw Jessica standing in the doorway, Brandon behind her, both of them watching her leave. 28 years ago, you watched me leave, Maggie thought, and you felt relieved. Today, I'm choosing to leave, and I feel free. The difference, she realized as she navigated the familiar streets toward her loft, was everything. 3 days after Thanksgiving, Emma texted, Can we meet? Just us. I need to talk. They met at the same cafe where they'd had their first awkward conversation 6 months ago. Now, sitting across from each other, the awkwardness had been replaced by something more complicated. Shared knowledge, mutual hurt, and the tentative beginnings of trust. I'm sorry about Thanksgiving, Emma said, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. I knew what they were planning. I tried to warn Lucas, but I didn't think it would be that brutal. It needed to happen, Maggie replied. 28 years of silence doesn't end with a pleasant dinner and apologies. It ends with truth. Emma nodded, then pulled out her phone. I need to show you something. Mom's been texting me. The messages were a progression of desperation. Emma, please talk to your grandmother. We need her. You don't understand what we're facing. Your father could go to prison. How can she call herself my mother and refuse to help? And finally, I'm sick, Emma. Stage 2 breast cancer. Surgery in January. I need my mother. Maggie's hands went cold. Is this real? I made her show me the medical records. Emma's voice was tight. It's real. Diagnosed 3 weeks before she invited you to Thanksgiving. She didn't tell Dad or Lucas. Just me. Why? Because she knew I'd make her tell you. Emma looked up, eyes red. She's using it, Grandma. The cancer is real, but she's also calculating. She knows you might say no to money, but won't say no to being there for medical crisis. Maggie sat back, the familiar ache of maternal love colliding with hard-won boundaries. Jessica was sick. Jessica was also manipulating her. Both things could be true simultaneously. What do you want me to do? Maggie asked. I want you to protect yourself, Emma said fiercely. I love my mother, but I see her clearly now. She's like those women you talk about in your videos, the ones who've spent so long trying to be what others want that they've forgotten who they actually are. She's your mother, Emma. And she's your daughter. But that doesn't mean you owe her unconditional rescue. Emma reached across the table. Whatever you decide, I'm still here, your granddaughter, not because of what you can give me, but because I want to know you. Maggie squeezed her hand, grateful for this unexpected gift. A granddaughter who saw her as a person, not a resource. I need time to think, Maggie said. Fair enough. Emma pulled out a business card. This is Mom's oncologist. I called and got permission for you to verify everything. The diagnosis, the surgery date, all of it. So you can make an informed choice. Later that night, Maggie called Rachel, who confirmed it within 2 hours. Stage 2 breast cancer, lumpectomy scheduled for January 15th. Good prognosis with treatment. All real. The question remained, what was Maggie going to do about it? Jessica showed up at Maggie's loft 1 week later, unannounced, looking smaller than Maggie had ever seen her. No makeup, hair pulled back messily, wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt. For the first time in decades, she looked like herself rather than the woman she'd been trying to be. How did you get my address? Maggie asked, keeping the door half closed. Tom. Jessica's voice was rough, like she'd been crying. Please, just 10 minutes. Against her better judgment, Maggie let her in. Jessica stood in the middle of the loft, taking in the space. The plants, the yoga corner, the bookshelves filled with feminist theory and self-help and novels. Photos of Tom's family, of Rosa and David, of the Wellness-Wise team. A life fully lived, no empty spaces waiting for Jessica to fill them. You really did build something, Jessica said quietly, without me. I had to, Maggie replied. You made sure of that. They sat at opposite ends of the couch, the physical distance a metaphor for everything between them. Emma told you, Jessica said, not a question. About the cancer? Yes. I'm not using it to manipulate you, Jessica's voice cracked. I mean, I am, but I'm also terrified. And I don't know how to ask for help without it being transactional, because that's all I've been for 28 years. A transaction. Be pretty enough for Brandon's business dinners. Be polished enough for Lillian's charity galas. Be perfect enough that no one looks too closely. Jessica, let me finish. Jessica took a shaky breath. When Dad died, you worked 3 jobs. You were never home. I was 8 years old, Mom. 8. And suddenly I was making Tom's lunch, putting him to bed, lying to teachers about why you missed conferences. I was so angry at you. Maggie felt the words like stones in her chest. Then I met Brandon, and his family was everything we weren't. Money, stability, leisure time. Lillian said to me, "Finally, you'll have the life your mother couldn't give you." And I believed her. I thought I was choosing better. You were choosing easier, Maggie said quietly. Those aren't the same thing. I know that now. Jessica was crying fully, mascara-free tears streaming down her face. I spent 28 years becoming someone I hate, married to a man who's probably going to prison, estranged from my daughter who sees right through me. And now I have cancer, and I'm 55, and I want my mother. The words hung between them, raw, honest, desperate. Why now? Maggie asked. Why not 5 years ago, 10 years ago, before you needed something? Because 5 years ago I was still pretending my life was perfect. Jessica met her eyes. 10 years ago I was still believing my own lies. Now everything's stripped away, and all that's left is the truth. I threw away the one person who loved me unconditionally, and I don't know if I can survive this without her. Maggie sat with this, feeling the pull of maternal instinct warring with self-preservation. She'd spent decades building boundaries. This was the test of whether they'd hold. I'll come to your surgery, Maggie heard herself say. I'll be there when you wake up. Jessica's face flooded with relief. Thank you. But there are conditions. The relief flickered. I won't give you money for legal fees. I won't bail Brandon out. I won't pretend the last 28 years didn't happen. Maggie's voice was firm. Maggie's done. We start therapy together after your recovery. You tell Brandon's family the truth about why we were estranged. No more making me the villain in your story. And if you lie to me once, I'm gone. One lie, Jessica. That's all it takes. That's harsh, Jessica whispered. That's survival. Mine. Maggie stood. You taught me I had to choose myself. I'm grateful for the lesson, even if you didn't mean to teach it. Jessica stood too, nodding slowly. Okay. Yes, all of it. Why are you agreeing? Jessica's laugh was bitter. Because I'm terrified of dying without my mother. And because Emma said she won't speak to me if I refuse. And because... She looked around the loft again. Because maybe if I start telling the truth, I can figure out who I actually am underneath all the performance. That's the best reason you've given me, Maggie said. Are you sure about this? Rosa asked over wine 2 nights later. They were in Maggie's loft. Rosa sprawled on the couch while Maggie paced. No, but I can't let her go through surgery alone. Even after everything? Especially after everything. Maggie stopped pacing. If I don't show up now, I'm no better than her. And I didn't spend 28 years rebuilding myself just to become the kind of person who abandoned someone facing cancer. Rosa was quiet for a moment. You know what I think? I think you're confusing compassion with obligation. What's the difference? Compassion is choosing to show up because it aligns with your values. Obligation is showing up because you feel guilty if you don't. Rosa sat up. Which one is this? Maggie considered. Compassion, I think. I'm not going because I owe her. I'm going because showing up for someone in crisis is who I've chosen to be. Even if she's using you? She's using me and she's terrified. Both things are true. I can acknowledge both and still choose how I respond. Rosa nodded slowly. Then you need to make sure Emma and Lucas know. You're doing this for you, not because Jessica manipulated you into it. That matters. Later, David called. His advice was simpler. Trust your gut. It's gotten you this far. And Tom, when she told him her decision, just hugged her and said, You're a better person than I could be. No, Maggie replied. I'm just a person who's learned the difference between boundaries and cruelty. Showing up for her surgery doesn't mean I'm erasing those 28 years. It means I'm choosing who I want to be now. Maggie hosted Christmas at her loft, a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. But if reconciliation was happening, it would happen on her terms, in her space. Present, Jessica, without Brandon, he'd gone to his sister's in Connecticut, Emma and Lucas, Tom's family, Rosa and her daughters, David and his wife, a chosen family with Jessica as uncertain guest. The meal was catered. Maggie knew her limits, but she'd done the decorating herself. A real tree, lights strung with care, ornaments from her years of building a life alone. No photos of Jessica, but Emma and Lucas's faces appeared in frames from Tom's secret visits, evidence of love that had persisted even in absence. After dinner, Maggie stood at the head of her table and cleared her throat. Everyone quieted. 28 years ago, I lost my daughter, not to death, but to choice. Her choice to prioritize others' approval over our relationship. My choice to eventually stop begging for scraps. Jessica flinched but didn't look away. 3 weeks ago, she invited me back into her life. Initially for money, let's be honest about that. Then because she's facing cancer and is scared. Both motivations are understandable. Neither is sufficient for reconciliation. Maggie picked up her wine glass, not drinking, just needing something to hold. But here's what I've decided. I'll be at your surgery, Jessica. I'll be there when you wake up. Because that's who I've chosen to be. Someone who shows up for people in crisis, even when they don't deserve it. However, Maggie continued, there are non-negotiable terms. No financial bailout for legal fees. That's your and Brandon's responsibility. Monthly therapy sessions together after you recover. Public acknowledgement to Brandon's family that you cut me out, not the other way around. Complete honesty. One lie and I'm done. And Emma and Lucas get priority access to me. They're innocent in this. She looked directly at her daughter. Most importantly, Jessica, I'm not doing this to earn your love. I already have my own. I'm doing this because showing compassion to someone who hurt me doesn't make me weak. It makes me free. Emma was crying. Lucas looked stunned. Tom's smile was proud. Jessica stood slowly. Those terms are fair, more than fair. Her voice shook. I accept. Then let's try, Maggie said. Not to go back, that's impossible, but to build something new from these broken pieces. They raised glasses. Tom proposed a toast to second chances that are earned, not given. Later, Jessica approached Maggie in the kitchen while others were dispersing to various corners of the loft. I don't know how to be your daughter anymore, Jessica admitted quietly. I don't know how to be your mother anymore either, Maggie replied. We'll have to figure it out as we go. What if I mess it up? You probably will. So will I. But we'll try anyway. Maggie handed Jessica a wrapped package. This is for you. Inside was a blank journal, leather-bound and elegant. Write what you couldn't say, Maggie explained. What you were too scared to admit. What you wish you'd said. Share it when you're ready or burn it. Your choice. But get honest with yourself first. That's where healing starts. Jessica held the journal like it was sacred. Thank you. You're welcome. Maggie returned to her guests, leaving Jessica alone with the gift and the weight of beginning again. The therapy was brutal. Maggie and Jessica sat across from Dr. Okafor, the same therapist who'd helped Maggie survive the initial estrangement and excavated decades of hurt. Jessica's rage about Maggie's absence during childhood, Maggie's grief over Jessica's abandonment, the ways they'd both failed each other, loved each other, broken each other. It wasn't healed, but it was honest. Jessica's surgery was successful. Clean margins, no chemo needed. Maggie held her hand in recovery, and when Jessica woke crying, "Mama, Maggie was there," Brandon was sentenced to 12 years for fraud. Jessica filed for divorce. She moved into a small apartment, got a job at a wellness center. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Started actually showing up to therapy. Emma and Lucas built real relationships with Maggie. Weekly calls, monthly dinners, genuine connection. By the following Thanksgiving, when Maggie hosted again, something had shifted. Not fixed. Healing isn't linear, but shifted. I gave the journal to Emma, Jessica said privately. She read it and said, "Mom, you've hated yourself for 28 years. Maybe stop." "Smart woman," Maggie replied. "She gets that from both of us." Jessica smiled, tentative but real. "Do you think we'll ever be like we were before?" "No. And that's okay. We can't be who we were. But we can be who we are now." They stood on Maggie's balcony, the November evening cool and clear. "Do you forgive me?" Jessica asked. Maggie considered. "I'm working on it. Some days are easier than others." "Fair enough," Jessica said. Later, after everyone left, Maggie sat alone with tea. Her phone buzzed with texts. Emma, "Love you, Grandma. Thanks for not giving up." Lucas, "Teaching my first yoga class next week. Channeling you." Tom, "Proud of you, Ma." And Jessica, "Thank you for showing me what boundaries look like. I'm sorry it took me 55 years to learn." Maggie smiled. Not the serene yoga instructor smile, but something more complex. The smile of a woman who'd survived abandonment, built an empire, and chosen, finally, to risk her heart one more time. Not because Jessica deserved it, because Maggie deserved the freedom that came with choosing compassion over bitterness. The best revenge, she'd learned, wasn't living well alone. It was living well and leaving space for imperfect healing. Margaret Sullivan, at 66, had finally learned the difference between forgiveness and letting go, between loving someone and requiring them to deserve it. The story wasn't over, but for the first time in 28 years, it was moving forward, and that was enough.